Okay, this is part three of we've got Troy to Ball State University. Now we're gonna figure out how he figured out how to graduate and get out of there, as well as some great experiences he had at Ball State, and then what he learned from that, and then where he went from Ball State. So, Troy, what was the best experience that you had when you were working in the athletic training program at Ball State University, or as a student, undergrad?
Yeah, the ooh that you'd have to that's a loaded question. Because I would think a lot of them were pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But I look back on I was talking about working softball and eventually basically I had softball by the spring. I had softball by myself. So um that experience was really unique because I'd really never worked with a women's team before, and so that was something totally different, and I learned a lot from that. I think um, so I worked football, men's volleyball. Men's volleyball was
Mhm.
probably more fun than it should have been, just because of the group of guys that were there and the coaching staff, and
Yes,
um, that
understood.
was a lot of fun. Um, but men's basketball was I finally felt like I found where I belonged at, and it took me a long time to get back.
On your niche.
Obviously, Tony and I clicked immediately on a lot of things, and so that season of working men's basketball, so it was interesting. So I'd done my internship with the Eagles um, in the summer of '91, and come back. And I was supposed to work football, but there was a position open at Delta High School. One of the GAs had left or something, and Rex goes, "Hey, here's the deal. They're going to pay you the stipend, non-certified. Here I am, non-certified. They're going to pay you the stipend, but you're going to cover the fall sports at Delta." And the sectional game against Jay County, that's who we played, we lost. And the next day was the first day of men's basketball practice. But I told this story to Tony um, right after I retired. This is how long it did it. So my buddies, my roommates said, "Hey, you need to come over to this house. There's a bunch of girls over here." My best friend was in town, and so soon as we pack up and head over to this, I forget what this house was, but it was a party. It was a great party. We all had a really good time. I just happened to wake up at 5 a.m. going, "Oh crap, I got to be at Irving Gym or at 7 a.m. to start taping guys for practice." So I go home, shower. I think I take a nap for about half an hour. And I am still buzzing from the night before. And I remember playing it so straight with Tony, taping ankles, not trying to make a move or do anything that was stupid, but I was still flying. And then for whatever reason, I got asked to be in a basketball drill. Coach Hemsaker said, "Can you do this?" And I'm like, "Sure." And it's a passing drill. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna plaster one off my face on this one." And made it through that. And then I just avoided Tony the rest of practice. Like I went wherever he went, I went someplace else. And he was kind of like, what's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm okay. I figured I'd just try to cover the floor a lot better for you, be another set of eyes down here or something." But it took me probably almost 30 years to tell him that. And I guess he never knew. So he didn't say like, "Oh yeah, I knew you were plastered" or
Right.
whatever. But
Yeah.
but um but I promised myself I would never ever ever do that again, which I did not. Um but um but yeah, that kicked off my basketball experience a little bit with that. But yeah, I mean it just clicked. But there was so many awesome experiences that that helped me understand that I wanted to work in college athletics. So
Okay.
that led to my next decision. I remember sitting down talking to Rex about, making a list of all the grad schools I wanted to go to. I wanted to go out west. I didn't, there was a couple I would consider going to in the Midwest, Big Ten schools, whatnot, but it really depended on who he knew people. And so, Utah was kind of down on the list, but Tony, Coach Majerus had just gone out there. Tony knew Bill Beam, the head athletic trainer there from Rick going out to Utah. And they had a GA position open. They actually had two. And so I applied for that one. They didn't require me to have my GRE scores to get into the exercise science program, even though I had taken the GRE,
Hmm.
and I hadn't done spectacular in that either. So it was beneficial to get out there. And what was really cool about Utah is that it took Bill a little bit. I mean, there was some suspense on whether I was going to get in or not. I mean, I found out I got into grad school before I found out I got the GA position, so I felt pretty good about that. Um, but found out later that there were a lot of people helping me out to get into grad school, including one provost, Warren Vanderhill. I found out later that he had done a lot of fly fishing with the ticket manager at Utah, and the ticket manager at Utah was good friends with Bill Bean, and that my name had gotten back through the channels um, through Dr. Vanderhill.
That's
Um, so it was kind of cool to know that. But that experience was even as awesome as anything else too, because I started out supposed to work football. The graduate assistant that was working, we're going to work gymnastics. Um, was having some difficulty passing his certification exam. Not that he was a very good athletic trainer. He just had some situations that he was struggling with, like a lot of people did. And so they had to make a switch. They had to have a certified athletic trainer in gymnastics. So Bill said, "Hey, would you consider doing this?" I'm like, "I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do." And little did I know that that women's gymnastics program they'd won a national championship the year before I got there. And um, I was a fish out of water. I had no clue. I mean, other than just basic um the thing that and that my gymnasts that I worked with will tell you, they called me the diamond maker, because they said I was so uptight about things compared to the guy that they had before. The guy they had before would he worked in a clinic in the morning, and then he would eat lunch and go to gymnastics practice. And literally, like the first part of gymnastics practice, he was a big guy, and he would take a nap on one of the mats the first part of practice because he was so tired from working in the clinic in the morning and then going to practice. But he'd tape him and go take a nap. That's how laid back he was. And I was more like, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. You can't, this doesn't do that. So
Yep.
we had girls mixing ibuprofen and the prescription in said that the doctor had them on, and then crying about how they weren't getting better. And I'm like, you can't do that. It cancels each other out. What do you mean I can't have my ibuprofen? I always take my ibuprofen before practice. And I'm like, well, you can't take it now. Um, and so they nicknamed me the Diamond Maker. But um, it was I learned a lot more about give and take in that gymnastics experience, about how you treat the person, the whole person, and not just the injury. And because gymnasts are complicated and they have a lot of issues going on, and so yeah, I mean, it was good. It taught me a lot, and it taught me how to deal with difficult coaches who end up being some of your best friends.
So
So,
you got your master's at University of Utah.
yep.
What'd you get your master's in?
Sports management.
Okay.
Yep.
Now,
But
yeah, go
but
ahead.
that let but because of here's the crazy thing is I get my master's in sports management. I take a class called group dynamics, and then met this guy who, because he was kind of like the team sports psychologist um for women's gymnastics there, and had also worked with the Seattle Seahawks and a ton of different things. A guy named Keith Hinchin from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and played basketball at Ball State in the 1960s. Um, and um, when he found out I was coming, he purposely did not say anything to me about being from Ball State until about our third meeting. And he goes, I understand, because I came out here too from a Midwestern city and a Midwestern college. And I go, really? Where'd you go to school at? He goes, I went to Ball State University. And he just smiled because he knew.
He knew
And
you had. Awesome.
yeah, and he was on my master's committee, and he was a lot more influential on a lot of things, and how I approach things, and he helped in that process of learning how to deal with the whole person and treat gymnasts as complex human beings that they are,
Yeah.
because of that. And um Unfortunately, he's gone now, but he did come back to a men's basketball game. They had a men's basketball reunion for his team, and he came back and we talked for quite a bit at that. And they've actually named the sports psychology kind of clinical room at Ball State in honor of him and his wife because he left some money to do that there. But um, he was really one of the smartest men I've ever had a chance to meet. So that Utah experience, there was some reasoning why I was there.
Yeah.
And I mean, just if we could have a whole podcast about our faith and stuff and how that plays into our athletic training, but
Yeah.
there's a reason why I was at Utah. And I think a lot of it was a chance to get to hang out with Keith Hinchon.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So what brought you back to the Midwest here with at Ball State University?
Well, I'd seen the mountains and I saw what I wanted to see with the mountains and
Headed for the
out there.
mountains, and you came back then.
Yeah, the mountains are awesome, but I was used to the flatlands, and so I needed to have some space and stuff. So I'd applied for a ton of jobs. In fact, I've got a file folder of all the rejection letters that I got on my first job. Um,
But
but
you knew college athletic training was your goal in
yeah,
mind.
yeah, that was my goal. And so Sean Comer, we went to Hooters in Indianapolis in 1995 for the convention. Um, And Sean basically said, "You got the job at St. Joseph's College. That's where Sean was at the time. They needed an assistant. He goes, I can't pay you a lot of money, but we'll have a really good time." And so um, uh, I said, I really don't have any. I interviewed at a Blackburn College in Illinois to be the head athletic trainer, but um, I was going to be the only person and didn't pay a whole lot of money. And um, I wasn't gonna. It was who wouldn't want to work with Sean? I mean, come on.
Sean Comer
Um,
was my first experience, one of my
yeah,
first experiences in the Ball State athletic training program. He was the GA for women's
yeah,
field hockey when I got assigned women's indoor field hockey during the winter, my first assignment at Ball Gym. And so I was with him
yeah.
that
And
year.
so, it was, I really didn't have anything else, but I just, it felt right. So I took that position and was with Sean for a year at St. Joe's, and then Sean comes back to Ball State, and I end up being the head athletic trainer there for 2 more years, and then on to Indiana State, where I spent 5 years there, and then came back to Muncie to work at Central Indiana Orthopedics. There was a lot of extenuating circumstances to come back and work in a clinic, but it was kind of a soft landing place for what I needed.
Yeah.
And then that kind of started my connection with Ball State again. And then in 2007, Neil came to me and said, "Hey, we're done doing this kind of guest athletic trainer with men's basketball. Would you be interested in doing this? It's not going to be an easy situation." And I said, "Hey, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to help the program.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if that's what you need."
We're gonna talk about that next.
Okay.